Hi, good evening. I'm Lonnie Stonich, the Executive Director of FAN. We're a nonprofit that presents programming exploring human development across the lifespan. I'm honored to welcome you to tonight's conversation between Alexandra Solomon and Esther Perel. Thank you for joining us tonight. FAN's YouTube channel has an archive of nearly 300 videos of past events, so be sure to subscribe to the channel to get updates when new recordings are posted. Dr. Alexandra Solomon is a couples therapist, speaker, author, professor, podcast host, retreat leader, and media personality. I think we got to put one more comma in there. And her framework of relational self-awareness has reached millions of people around the globe. She brilliantly translates cutting-edge research and clinical wisdom into practical tools people can use to bring awareness, curiosity, and authenticity to their relationships. Dr. Solomon is on faculty at the School of Education and Social Policy at Northwestern University, and is a licensed clinical psychologist at the Family Institute at Northwestern University, both of which are FAN sponsors. She hosts a hit podcast, Reimagining Love, and is the award-winning author of 3 books, Taking Sexy Back, Loving Bravely, and her new book, Love Every Day. She is joined tonight by psychotherapist and New York Times bestselling author Esther Perel, who is recognized as one of today's most insightful and original voices on modern relationships. Fluent in 9 languages, she helms a therapy practice in New York City and serves as an organizational consultant for Fortune 500 companies around the world. Her celebrated TED Talks have garnered more than 40 million views, and her international bestseller, Mating in Captivity, I love the title, Unlocking Erotic Intelligence, has been translated into more than 30 languages. Her latest best-selling book is The State of Affairs, Rethinking Infidelity. She is also the host of a hit podcast, Where Should We Begin?, which is available on Apple Podcasts. Her latest project is Where Should We Begin? A Game of Stories with Esther Perel. And now let's welcome Alexandra and Esther.
Love every day. Who could resist such an invitation? I mean, love, and it's loved and loving. So it goes, the verb goes in both directions. It's a treat for me to be in conversation with you about this little gem of a book that invites us to enhance intimacy, improve communication, and solve some of our relational problems. And you work always in a triad. So you talk about awareness, curiosity, and empowerment. But interestingly, you usually have written chapter books. And this one comes in a different format. Actually, it made me think of a cookbook, which you open, you go like this, you see what it appeals to you. It's a real exercise of attraction and seduction. And you say, let me try this. And then you go and you ask your partner, are you interested in that? Would you like to taste this? And it's exactly what we would do with these little entries that are 365 entries to cultivate relational self-awareness, and in small bites. Actually, they're like amuse-bouche, as we say, not the big production, but small ritualized practices. And I was curious, what made you choose that format? Because we're going to talk form before we talk content.
That's right. Well, first of all, how amazing is this? I love being in conversation with you anywhere, anytime, on a bike, whatever, wherever we are, whatever we're doing. So I'm so grateful that you have taken the time, and I'm so grateful, Lonnie, for everything that you have done and what FAN has done to make tonight possible. I have so much respect for the work that Lonnie does and the work that FAN does, and I love this giving day tomorrow. Like, who wouldn't want to choose 1, 2, or 3 books? So what a wonderful event for us to be together in tonight.
Absolutely.
And yeah, this book was a challenge. Like, I think you and I are similar. I mean, I am a teacher, I am a therapist, and I'm a speaker. So I like words, and I have lots and lots and lots of words. And so it is difficult for me to be concise. And I think that has been a growing edge for me as I have played for the last 5-10 years in this space of social media, of doses, of trying to figure out how do you kind of consolidate and translate in a way. And I think I resisted it for a very long time. I would think, well, if I don't have an hour, there's nothing that I can teach or offer. But this has been a muscle. And as I have worked on practicing this muscle of figuring out what is the little bite, what could I offer today, it actually brought me to these, what we would call in family therapy, isomorphs or parallels between offering a sort of micro bite of insight or practice. That's how relationships grow, right? It's not like we are the best of friends on day one. It's not like I want to commit to you on the first date. We need lots and lots of iterations of connection, little doses of connection. We can't do anything about the fact that relationships grow and develop over time. So there's that parallel. And I think there's also a parallel to how we heal. You know, there's no therapist on earth, not even my dear friend Esther, who can offer the one insight that makes somebody's entire life or somebody's entire relationship make sense, right? Therapy is touching something, moving away from it, coming back to it, taking in another round. I think of the healing journey as like a spiral staircase. So I think there's a way in which this 365 of you pick up the book, you know, you flip to a page, either today's date or whatever page, you read a little entry, you come away, and you come back again. So I think there is, I've gotten myself into this idea of the small dose. I'm sure I will hopefully write another chapter book, but it's been really fun to kind of play in this smaller space.
But the word small is misleading here, right? Because love every day is in a way a metaphor for how intimacy takes roots and grows in these very small moments. You know, I remember an article I read long ago when I was writing Mating that said, you know, we always talk about an intimate relationship rather than a relationship with intimate moments, intimate exchanges. And you know, I went through it like this and I just thought, you just want to read a few lines and then you want to go and reflect on them. You want to go and practice them. You want to try them out. It's actually reading with a very different mission in mind. It's reading to taste, to experience, not just to with the mind, but in immediate translation. Does that fit to me? How do I apply? And so what you write is a more broad general thing, but how one reads it is instantly very, very personal. Now, this happens in many readings, but there's something about this format that invites this to a more intense level. At least that's been my experience. Yeah. You know, instead of the sweeping gestures, the word really that I kept coming up with was ritual. It's more even than a practice. There's something very ritualized about it. That is a dedicated, you know, a ritual is a practice that is imbued with creativity and intention and meaning. That's what differentiates it from a routine. And there's a ritualized practice around how one can use this book that I think really elevates the relationship.
I've received really sweet, you know, photographs or little messages in my DMs about couples who now on Sunday morning, when they're having their morning cup of coffee, they'll just, you know, read an entry together. And I think that's a sort of lost art form, is couples reading back and forth to each other. So I love this idea that there are couples, you know, around the world who now have a really easy place to go, open up to a page and read something to their beloved and start a different kind of conversation. I think that is what part of what we need in especially in a longer term relationship, is just something to kind of triangulate in to have a different beginning point for a conversation, right? Because we know
I totally relate. It's exactly like the card game.
It is.
Where should we begin? You get a question and it invites a different entrance. It brings novelty, playfulness, curiosity. And I think we both are very invested in relationships experiencing aliveness in that way. You call it authenticity, I call it aliveness, but we are going for something very similar, and through practices that are not just about regurgitating what has caused the problem, but actually experiences that generate new cells.
Right. It's what I think we're talking about in the last few years about kind of doing the work. You know, there's a lot of like conversation about like doing the work, doing relationship work. And I think that doing the work is definitely looking at the patterns we bring in from childhood, family of origin dynamics, ways in which we're missing each other in conversation. That is certainly doing the work. But I think sometimes people who relish your work and who relish my work, we can, people can get a bit heavy-handed about the work being excavating deep old stuff and maybe missing, opportunities to have different conversations about imagination and possibility and interest. So I think that there's like a need sometimes for a conversation that maybe isn't about us focusing so much on why did you say this and why did I say this, but a different conversation where we can really get back to being curious about each other.
I call them generative conversations rather than problem-ridden conversations.
Mm-hmm.
It's the challenge. It's tempting to go and talk about what's wrong, but most often we find that we don't necessarily create new practices by focusing on the absence of the good practices. We create them by actually engaging with them actively. And one of the things that I know you aim for is relational self-awareness. And I love the combination of the two words, because often when we talk about self-awareness, it can be highly individualistic and it's focused on the self. If you say relational, sometimes there's the fear that it doesn't take enough of the individual into account. So you really brought these two realms of experience, these polarities, right? The relationship to the other and the relationship to the self into one expression. How, in your own words, do you define relational self-awareness?
Mm-hmm. I define relational self-awareness as the ongoing, curious and compassionate relationship that we cultivate with ourselves that becomes a foundation for a thriving, intimate partnership. Although we can certainly bring relational self-awareness to friendship, to parenting, to our work relationships, but it is that willingness again and again to be curious about what are the lenses through which I'm experiencing this moment. I think it's so easy, especially in a long-term relationship, to get really focused on what the other is doing. If he hadn't done that, I wouldn't have done this. It's so easy to look at the ways in which our partner isn't doing enough or is doing it the way we don't want them to, or why after so many years do they keep doing it like this? And more difficult, more courageous, more generative to ask, what is it about my reaction? Which is not letting our partner off the hook necessarily. It is willing to look at the choreography, the back and forth, and the fact that I have a responsibility to inquire about what's the tender spot this activates inside of me, what's the belief that it confronts inside of me. So relational self-awareness also gets us out of, I think sometimes in the self-help industry, which it's built into the title, self-help, I think it can get a little bit navel-gazy. I think it can get a little bit sort of like excavating the soul for the sake, like as an end unto itself. And to me, I always want that doing the work to be tied to, okay, so how then does it allow me to change the pattern with this person in my life? How then does it create shift within the relationship? So that idea of we go inside, we cultivate the relationship with self in the service of the relationship with other.
I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, I could be a person here, and maybe there are many others joining us this evening who are saying, I do this all the time, but my partner doesn't do this. Right. I have a good amount of relational accountability. My partner doesn't. I apologize. I take responsibility. My partner doesn't. But I also can imagine people listening to us and from the bat saying, oh, I would love to do this, but I can't imagine my partner ever opening a book like this. This is not their style. They're skeptics. They don't want to do this. So you've got often one person who is all engaged and saying, yeah, let me try this. I'm curious. I want to know possibilities. And they're sometimes accurate and sometimes not. Projection onto their partner that the other one will not do this. So maybe before we even continue, we need to address the question of the skeptics.
Right. Yes. Okay. Well, so let's figure it out together, because I'm really curious where you go with this, because I didn't even, when I first published Loving Bravely, I did not know this was going to be the question that I would get over and over and over again. I do think sometimes it is more when somebody says, I will, but I know my partner won't. I do think that is sometimes a fear, as you're saying. And that can be a defense against the vulnerability, right? It can sort of be like an opt out, like it's not even worth trying because I know that they won't. But I think also there's a way, I mean, I think there's a lot of variables. I think sometimes gender is in the mix. I think oftentimes if we're talking about a cis hetero couple, it is the female partner who's saying this to me or to you, and their partner is a man, and they've been, socialized. And so there's a way in which this is the logical, this is the way the dots connect when we, by age 3, touch our boys less than we touch our girls, talk to our boys less than we talk to our girls. So there's a way in which we raise our boys and our men in a particular way, or at least have historically. I think it's really exciting to see what younger generations are doing now. We raise our boys and our men in a certain way, and then we blame them for not having a kind of capacity that we want them to have. So I think there's that piece of it, certainly. And I think there's a difference between skeptical, perhaps frightened. I think oftentimes the frightened is, I'm frightened that if I try to engage with you in this way and I get it wrong, I'm going to disappoint you. So there's a way in which the skeptical partner is opting out for a fear of getting it wrong. So I think there needs to be a lot of space to understand the difference between, is your partner skeptical and a novice, or is your partner truly contemptuous of this work, truly holds vulnerability in a place of contempt and disdain?
I have 2 moments that I was thinking about my relationship to skeptics. In my practice, and one is in my practice, one is when I'm on stage and I'm speaking to a large audience. So in my practice, I typically will say, we're both of you interested in being here today. And when one person says, no, I'm not, or I prefer to take care of things myself, or we don't talk to each other, so why would we need to come to talk to a stranger, or any of these things, my first tendency is to get up and to shake their hand and to thank them for being here, despite being skeptics, because that shows to me how truly open-minded and willing they are.
So true.
And that it is not true, so clear that their partner would be so willing and open to go and do something of this kind of importance that they don't believe in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my goal is to completely change the perspective of the partner. Instead of seeing your partner as a skeptic, your partner is someone who is doing something despite the fact that they don't believe in it, right, because you've asked, or because they care about you, or because they're despite their belief, they're willing to come and be here. On stage, I literally, from the start, am asking who is here because they were basically having their arm twisted or convinced to become a +1. And they came here even though this is utterly not their thing. And then I just say, I really bow to the skeptics. Because seriously, it's easy for those who buy into it to be there. That is not a challenge for them. And what they don't often see is how much of a challenge it is for the other person to be there. And then in the same frame of relational self-awareness that you just described, for me to ask, would I have been so open to go and do something that I completely don't agree with, don't believe in, don't care about, and all of that, just because my partner suggested it? Beautiful. And often you will find that the answer is, I'm not so sure. I would have been that open. And so then I say, you may want to thank your partner, show them the minimum of appreciation, that the issue is not they're here, I want them to want. No. The fact is that they're here because you want, and that deserves you to take it in.
That's right. Do you think sometimes the person who's here for it, like the believer, do you think the believer sometimes misses the fact that the skeptic believer dynamic, there's a functionality and a stability to it, right? If you have two believers, then every moment in a relationship is up for analysis. You can put a spotlight anywhere. This is what happens when 2 therapists get in, well, maybe, I don't know, sometimes it could be, but that there's, that then everything is up for grabs. When you have a skeptic, there's a way in which things perhaps just wash over. This is, my husband and I are like this very much so. Like, I'm grateful that he doesn't hold my feet to the fire on every little thing that he could. I think there's a way in which there's to have a partner who just doesn't get too ruffled, doesn't look too deeply. Like, I think that there's a way in which the believers sort of judge that as you're living on the surface, or you're not deep enough, you're not self-reflective enough. But there's an advantage also to having that just ability to kind of go with a moment and not bring us back to, yes, but why? And what do we do differently next time? I think that there's a way in which that there's a complementarity that I think is easy to miss, because the believers sort of hold books like this in such warm regard. Like we have to do this all the time, every day, you know.
I always say, I really do not want you to change your belief, but if it was helpful, just tell me.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
you can completely judge and evaluate this on the basis of its efficiency, its efficacy. Was it helpful? Did it make a difference?
Mm-hmm.
And you can continue to say, I don't believe in therapy. I don't believe in this kind of self-help, self-development, self-whatever, but it helped me. And that's all that matters.
Yeah.
And I think that what you have is the ability of to not feel that everything has to be completely, as we call in our jargon, egosyntonic.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
where I cannot do it if it's not fully embraced by me. And so this leads me actually
Mm-hmm.
to talking
Mm-hmm.
about, in a way, when you look at this complementarity, it is one person who is more challenged by ambivalence. It needs to feel more unified. If I'm doing this, I have
Right.
to believe in it. I have to be wholeheartedly in it, and I cannot hold contradiction. Because when the skeptic who shows up is somebody who can hold contradictions or multiple parts of a thing. I don't agree with this or don't believe in that, and yet I'm doing this.
Right.
Versus if I don't believe in it, there's no reason I should do that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and I think the believer, right. And the believer then is like, if my partner isn't as in as I am, like, I think it's difficult, for to accept that if you're the one who's the believer, and we're making this sort of simplified for the purpose of this conversation, but the believer then is going to take the lead on going to an Esther event, on looking at a book like this. And can you take the lead and remember that your partner following you is a reflection of their love, as you said, and can you just have that, hold that ambivalence? Your partner is not the same as you in this way, and there's a tension there, and it doesn't need to be solved. It just needs to be carried. I did not partner with somebody who's exactly like me in this domain, and they don't perhaps need to be.
I would go even a step further, Alex. I would say that the ability of being with someone who is doing something just because you asked, without having to be convinced that what you think is important to them. They're doing it because it's important to you. And that is actually very generous and accommodating and kind, and sometimes just simply deserves your ability to receive it. And what I think it goes to sometimes is that, why is it that we want the other person to think what we think or to assess the same importance to something? Because if I just say, I know you're doing it for me, then I have to fully take into account my sense of self-worth, how important I am for you, and how, see, if you do this because you care about it too, then I don't have to deal with the fact that you're doing this out of a gesture of love. This is love every day, actually.
Yep.
The question is, why is that so difficult for some of us?
Right. Yeah. I feel, as you say it, what I feel inside of me is like this expansion in my chest, right? To really, like, there has to be an opening up inside to receive, my partner is doing this for me. It doesn't have to be equal. It doesn't have to be, I think there's that, sitting with that ambivalence, that imbalance. There has to be the ability to receive it, just as you're saying.
It's the ability to accept that one is loved. Right?
And to trust it. To trust it that there's not going to be, there's not going to be a retaliation. There's not going to be like no, but I did that last week, now you have to do this. And I think for people who have a wound there, right, around, in my family of origin, somebody would give you something, but then they would retaliate the next week, or they would take it away the next week. Like I think there's a need to kind of investigate why is it so hard? I think part of the why is it so hard is receiving is vulnerable. Receiving confronts our sense of worth. But for some of us, it may be that receiving hits us in a really tender place from family of origin, from old trauma.
I don't trust it. I don't trust it. I don't.
What's the price?
Yes, exactly. So that actually is a wonderful transition to how the invitations that you have in many of these entries that help us understand that connection between the present and the past, but in a way that allows us to create a new future.
It is. It's not, this work of looking at our families of origin, what I call our original love classrooms. When we're little, we're these little social scientists, and we take in through observation. We watch the big people in our homes. We watch how they talk to each other. We learn all kinds of lessons implicitly, just absorbed through our pores around how relationships go. And there's also in terms of how we're related to, who we have to become, the roles that we take on in our families of origin. And all of that is really important to understand, because as we know, we bring those patterns into all of our adult relationships, certainly into our adult intimate relationships. And so that work of connecting those dots, it's never done, as far as I'm concerned, to throw our attachment figures under the bus, because I believe that the vast majority of attachment figures, parent the best they can at the time that they're doing it, to the degree of their own healing, to the, outer edges of their own awareness at that time. So we don't do that work to throw parents under the bus. We also don't do that work in order to put our family of origin wounds at our partner's feet, right? And say, like, because I have this fear of abandonment, because I had my trust betrayed early on, now you have to never, ever hurt me or challenge me in that way again. So I think there's those delicacies around it, around what do we do with those insights that we glean when we connect those dots? And I think that we do that work so that we know when there's a time warp going on, when this moment is feeling an awful lot like when right now, here and now is feeling a whole lot
Past and
like
present collapse.
Yeah.
It's a temporal collapse. The thing that I have often found useful, and I know we've talked about that in our other conversations, is, I when you have love every day, I think of love not as a noun, but as a verb. In fact, that's what you did. You're practicing it. You're conjugating it in multiple tenses. And part of how the family of origin story manifests is in our challenge with some of the verbs. For some of us, it's to ask. For some of us, it's to give. For some of us, it's to receive, to share, to play, to trust, to want. And all of this, there are a bunch of more others, but all of these are verbs that are part of the larger, bigger verb called to love. And one of the things I think we both often say is that we are not just the sum total of what happened to us, but we are also what we become. It's a kind of a Jung sentence, right? So a lot of this, when I think of it in generative terms, is also the fact that it's helping people become and redefine themselves separately from the story in which they were shaped, they were formed. And I think that there are actually a few experiences in relationships that you also talk about, which are kind of pivotal moments when this all comes back gushing at us. Heartbreak, inequity, the sense of injustice in the relationship, imbalance, which usually means a return to, will I always be alone? Will it always be me? Will it all be on me? Will I ever have somebody who thinks of me, sees me, takes care of me, makes me feel less alone, safer, less burdened, etc.? And the third one is, how do I know whether I should stay or whether I should go? When it's situations where it's too good to leave, but too bad to stay. And the whole kind of dance around relational ambivalence. I think that when I kind of take a step back and I say, what are three major situations that come up in our relationships? There are many others, but these pop up always.
It's especially important in those moments to look for the time warp. Where is the old wound coming up for me again?
Yes, rejection,
Uh-huh.
rejection, exclusion, heartbreak,
Yeah.
um,
Injustice.
injustice, as in
Mhm.
abandonment, but it's not abandonment like the other abandonment. It's really justice. It's in order to have a relationship, I have to disappear for the other person to exist. I have to have no needs in order for you to not to be there for me, that kind of thing. And then the third one is ambivalence. It's the uncertainty about what can I ask for? How good is good? Do I deserve more? What is the entitlement of the deprived? That.
Yeah.
What do you see?
Yeah, it is. Well, I think that's fascinating. I don't disagree with any of it. I think it is, those are moments, I think, because each of those is so incredibly existential. It's where it's really important that none of us get seduced into the 3 questions to ask yourself or the 3 steps to clarity, right? We can't kind of go for the easy, obvious. I think that, especially around any of these, I think it can feel like around ambivalence, for example, the should I stay or should I go? That feeling of stuckness of I'm in, I'm out, takes on a life of its own, and it starts to become almost like, it can start to feel like this is who I am. I am stuck. I am somebody who doesn't know what's best for themselves. And so I think that's why we have to have those deeper tools of looking for the connections to the past so that we liberate ourselves,
I'm going to read the ambivalence one.
Yeah, that's good. That was
just
yesterday's.
Because, yes, perhaps the opposite of ambivalence is not certainty, but patience. Relational ambivalence is common and it's also painful. Why can't I figure out what I want? Uncertainty is stressful and emotionally taxing, and it can affect your sense of self-esteem. I invite you to remember that if you are in a relationship and you are not making a decision to leave, you are choosing to stay for now, for today. As in all these entries, this does not apply to abusive relationships in which decision-making is shaped by risk, safety, and consequence. See what happens if you reframe your decision to stay in a relationship as a choice. Your agency is evidenced by the fact you remain in the relationship. The reframe can help you remember that you're a protagonist in the story of your life. B, an act of patience. Patience is a grace you can offer yourself, a grace that is important for either ultimate outcome, whether you're leaning towards staying or going. The process from confused to clear will always teach you something, whether you end up deciding that the relationship must end, whether you decide to invest in it more. Relational self-awareness questions. What happens inside of you when you reframe this decision to stay? What do you feel in your body? Where do you feel it? What stories do you attach to patience? Where do the stories come from? How would you describe someone who is patient? If your answer is critical, i.e., people who are patient are weak, self-abandoning, suckers, check in with yourself. Whose voice is behind those words? Beautiful. It's beautiful because it's simple and deep.
So fun to have you read my words to me. What a treat that is. Yeah, I think that's that idea of if the relationship isn't ending today, you are staying. And that's not a blaming statement, right? That's no judgment. It is just a reminder that even when you feel helpless and stuck, to see kind of the staying as a choice rather than a resignation. I think that's how it takes on a life of its own, is it feels like I'm staying because I'm stuck. Well, in staying, you're making a choice. There's that little wedge of agency that you have there. And I think that is helpful for people to remember when they feel so stuck. And I think there are ways in this culture, especially, there's a cultural value around surety, around clarity, around decisiveness. I think there are times that we devalue patience or we conflate patience with weakness. And decisions around decisions around relationships it's enormous, right? It confronts your entire identity. And so of course it's going to take a while.
I like to say to people, some relationships are defined by the quality of the bond between the two people, the primary protagonists. Sometimes there's more than two people. But some relationships are not defined by what happens between those two people, but by what these two people can make available for each other. And that means that the relationship becomes a scaffolding. And it has to do with the family, the children, the lifestyle, the extended family, the in-laws, the friends, the community, the economic support, the support because there is a child who is particularly more challenging and with special needs. And all of that is what this relationship makes available for you, what it allows you to be able to experience in your life. And the value of the relationship is maybe less intrinsic, as in what happens in the connection between the two people, but the extrinsic value is enormously important. And it doesn't get much credit these days. These days, it all has to be just what's happening between the two people. You know, people also are in different developmental stages. And, you know, the question is, are you willing to lose all of this for that? And that will create an ambivalence. When you emphasize what exists between us, you lean on the side of I want to go. But when you emphasize on what this us has made available for you in your life, you say, I'm not ready to give all this up. And so you need to know what it is you're choosing. It's not just that you have a wedge of agency. It's a particular choice that you are making. And one of them is seen as more valid than the other at this moment in the modern ideology of love.
But certainly not historically.
No, historically it was the opposite. It's once marriage and committed adult relationships became love stories, as much as they were life stories. They also had to be a love story. Then we evaluate the quality of the relationship on the basis of those ingredients. How intimate are we? How much do we communicate? How much do I feel seen by you? How much do I feel adored, cherished by you? How much do I desire you? All these ingredients become more important than what are the things that we have built together, that we made possible for each other. Who have we care of? Whose illnesses have we accompanied? What homes have we built? Which children have we raised? Which friends have we supported? Those are different ingredients.
Okay, so let's keep playing it out. So if somebody, like I can hear the light bulbs going on in people's minds right now. So if that light bulb goes on and they can feel themselves making a shift and realizing that they have devalued the facilitated role the relationship has played, because we culturally now devalue and diminish that idea that relationships bring us an entire life. They make possible all these elements of life. If somebody's going to step into like making peace with that or embracing that or accepting that, then I imagine there's a different, then you have a chance to look at your partner differently, right? You're going to kind of, you're going to ask
your expectations.
Not lowers, it's not about settling or lowering or letting go of, it's about shifting though, right?
Yes, because you know, you're not getting those needs met, but you're getting those needs met, the other needs met. And you need to, it's a level of honesty with oneself that just says, you know, no, if I want to feel really deeply understood, it may not be my partner that I turn to in those moments. But if I want someone who shows up for me when I'm in trouble and fixes things, but is very practical. You know, I'm thinking even about the distinction you made with your husband, you know, that you say, you know, excavations and emotional, you know, digging isn't his thing, but I can rely on him. If I have something, he'll be there at any moment, all the time. And then I will say, well, Alex, maybe, you know, when you want that deep excavation of your emotional interiority, probably you have friends with whom you can do this much deeper. Instead of constantly telling your husband, I don't get this from you, I don't get this from you, which also doesn't allow you to appreciate what you do receive from him. Because you're focused on this. Then I say, you know, imagine that what you have, and the reason you chose him is maybe that at the time there was something very important about that level of practicality of somebody who's a rock, who shows up, who doesn't ensnare you into their drama.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
that meant something really important to you. So a piece of it is you go back to the original choice. What was it about this person that you chose them then?
Yeah.
Because often what becomes the source of conflict later is what was the source of attraction in the
That's
beginning.
right. That's right. And I think people can really, really scare the shit out of themselves when they start to look at that. Like that they like part of the challenge of becoming more relationally self-aware is you start to look at your own life story with new eyes, and you can see the reasons that you chose this person in this moment. So I think that we have to be careful to not just, we're not under, as we become more expansive and we continue to imagine new possibilities for here forward, it doesn't mean we have to undo and become critical of the choices that got us here today. I think that is a pitfall. I think that a
Yep.
lot of people who are doing this work will make, is because just because you can now see why you made certain choices at certain moments does not make that choice wrong, does not mean that choice has to be undone. It can be looked at in a different light, but not, you don't have to strip your entire, you don't have to go do full eat, pray, love on your entire life to be, to be stepping into new directions. And I think that's a really hard, it's a really difficult, frightening space.
And I say this because the pull is often towards saying, my cost benefit here, it's a bit of a, the transactional approach, isn't pleasing me. And I think that it's often not so black and white. Meaning, if you want to understand why you are caught in the ambivalence, is because you are often actually trying to hold different, sometimes opposing sets of needs inside of you. And depending on which one you're considering at that moment, you will find yourself go here and go there.
Yeah.
And the tendency is to want, this is to go back to what you said, you want to feel certain. And I think it's a beautiful frame to say, instead of certainty, cultivate patience. Because if you cultivate patience, you will understand what kind of certainty you're actually pursuing that is actually entrapping you in the very ambivalence that you're caught in.
And how can, and what growth is available for you in learning how to sit ever more comfortably in not having that certainty, right? So much of life is becoming ever more comfortable just sitting with things not being rock solid and crystal clear and black and white and binary.
And I think that this is getting harder for many of us, actually, because I think we are living a life in which we are constantly surrounded by, to begin with, just a whole bunch of predictive technologies that are continuously helping us to smooth the edges. We have a polished, response to everything, what I should listen to next, how I should get to a certain place, how I should never get lost, wherever I should go eat, what I should watch afterwards, who I should date. I mean, it actually is depriving us of the experimentation, the doubts, the uncertainties, the frictions that have been so much a part of life that help us in our relationships. I think we're getting less and less able to tolerate certain uncertainties, especially in relationships.
Absolutely. It is that's your thesis in your artificial intimacy work that has been so has landed so deeply for so many people. It is absolutely. I continue to teach this undergraduate relationship education course at Northwestern University called Marriage 101. It's been, this spring will be our 24th year teaching it. So the class is older than my children, and it's been a part of my career, my entire career. And I will notice, my office hours, students come in to talk about different relationship challenges that they're facing. And there are oftentimes sort of central themes that I'll notice over the course of the quarter. And a theme that I noticed this past year was student after student coming in and saying, I have noticed that I don't have a whole lot of capacity to give people the benefit of the doubt. The moment I'm frustrated in a friendship, I'm out. I feel like I'm cutting and running with somebody I want to date or with a friend, and I don't have a lot of capacity to just kind of sit, as you're saying, sit with the friction, sit with the tension. And I was really so impressed with my students' relational self-awareness, right? The fact that they know they have this, and it is, and I think there's a risk of turning a we thing into a me thing, right? So I think that for the way that you talk about this in terms of this is happening at the level of the collective, is really important, because I think we can feel so ashamed of ourselves that we don't have a lot of, if we notice that we don't have a lot of capacity for ambivalence or capacity for conflict or tension, we can start to feel ashamed and think there's something wrong with us. And I think it is important to look at these broader cultural elements while still taking responsibility for figuring out, okay, so what are the skills I need in order to say to a friend, hey, can we talk about what happened last week? Because I value you. I like what we're building here. And I know that that didn't sit particularly well with me. Can we talk about it?
I think that a lot of my work in the recent years is more and more geared towards helping people have difficult conversations, helping people be turn conflict into connection, helping people understand differences while being close to people, not just their partners, but their family members, their friends. And it's around values, it's around political ideas. It's about how you not polarize, and then basically how to not be conflict avoidant. You disagree with me, I can't talk to you. Or I can't come and be at a holiday with you, or I dread to be at a holiday, more and more. When I used to think about the word communication, I wasn't just thinking about these aspects of communication. I was talking about how do you express yourself, experience validation, experience empathy, experience closeness. Conflict has re-emerged as a central part of my work, be it in courses, in the podcast. And I do think that it is a response to what's happening in the society at large. I mean, couples therapy is a microcosm, and relationship therapy is a microcosm of people telling you in the consequences on their relationship of the social changes that are happening outside. That's what your students are telling you.
100%.
I don't have the capacity of giving people the benefit of the doubt. Is a consequence of what happens in our society at large, and then how it manifests. And I mean, I don't remember a time when I heard so many people talking about losing friends.
Yes, 100%.
Friendship breakup. It's a whole new subject.
It's a whole new
Friendship
thing.
breakup.
Estrangement. 28% of Americans are estranged from somebody in their family.
That is huge.
It's huge. It's a huge number.
That is huge. That is really huge. Shall we talk a little bit about heartbreak? Just because I know that both of us receive a ton of questions around loss. Basically the vulnerability of love is that it lives adjacent to the fear of loss.
That's right. That's right. Last night I was deep in our friend Eli Finkel's research about self-concept clarity. He did a prospective study. So he had a group of people, and he studied them across time and studied their self-concept clarity. And he knew that throughout the course of the study, some of those people would go through a breakup. And what he found is that when people went through a breakup, they experienced a precipitous drop in their self-concept clarity. Not forever, but I think it's such an important piece of research for us all to have and to know, is that breakups hurt, not, for a number of reasons, the loss of that person, but breakups hurt because it is distressing to have what Mavis Hetherington called that not me feeling. Mavis Hetherington was one of the first people to study divorce. And she found that people who are going through a divorce felt like not me. And that feeling of I don't feel like myself is incredibly disorienting, and it's emotionally distressing. But what really feels so important to me is to convey that is not a sign of your brokenness. It speaks to the depth of change that happens when we fall in love, when we create a partnership, that our self expands, our self shifts, not because we're weak, not because we're codependent, but because that's the nature of relationship. And so in the loss of relationship, there's that loss of, wait a minute, who am I? What are my pillars? And so I think knowing that is really helpful, because in the absence of knowing that, I think it can feel shameful. I ought to know who I am. I ought to be able to step away from this relationship or have the loss of this person and still feel like I know who I am and what I'm all about.
That's why some traditions give it a year of mourning, a year where you have the last time you did something and the first time you do something in that new life, in that new structure of your life. But I also think it depends how one is left. I mean, that not all ending are the same. I think an ending that is based on a betrayal is different from an ending that is based on two people realizing that they've done a beautiful journey together of 10, 15, 25 years and realize that they have other ideas for what they want their lives to look like. I think that betrayal and heartbreak is a double affliction.
Absolutely.
And to me, and I'm sure to you too, it is one of the most common questions we get, is how do you overcome betrayal, duplicity, lying, cheating, the shattering of your entire reality, the way that you understood it, the fracturing, not just the loss of confidence in the other, but the loss of confidence in yourself. How could I not see? How could I not know, etc. And that was a huge topic on itself, but I think you have one on betrayal in here as well. Right?
Me too, but I don't know that.
I hope it is the one. No. Yes, it is. Relational betrayal comes in all kinds of textures and tones. When we think of betrayal in relationship, we often think first about infidelity. Sexual betrayal is surely painful and seismic, shaking the entire foundation of a relationship. But sometimes betrayal is keeping vital information secret, making surprise financial decisions or purchases, being dishonest about work, the past, friendships, health problems, family matters. There are hundreds of other ways we deceive, disappoint, or destroy trust. At the level of the individual, each person has work to do. The one who has been hurt sits with questions. How did I miss this? Who am I for opting to stay? How will I know whether and when I am safe? What do I need to learn from this? The one who has been dishonest sits with questions. How could I hurt someone I love? Will I be forgiven? How do I have empathy for their pain without drowning in my own shame? What do I need to learn from this? The realization of betrayal positions the couple at a crossroads. Does this destroy us, or do we try to repair? The path of recovery is rich with both landmines and opportunity.
That's for sure. That's for sure.
Care to comment?
I think that when we talk about heartbreak, I think there's a kind of heartbreak when we are the one who's done the betraying, when we are the one who's been deceitful. I think in my 20 whatever years of practice, I've had many couples where there's been betrayal, and the person who has cheated every single time there's an element of, I can't believe that I did that. Unless you are a sociopath, your own betrayal is something that has gotten away from you or is confusing to you or flummoxing to you. And so there's that self-inquiry that is vital for any for the possibility of restoration of the relationship or a peaceful, mindful closure of the relationship. But that self-inquiry is also essential for one's own healing, because betrayal is oftentimes a reflection of some wound, some element from the past that hasn't been tended to, or some reflection of, I couldn't bring this to you, so I took it out there. So what do I need to learn from this? And so I think that piece of the person who's done the betrayal also has their own work to do. And I think sometimes shame and certainly cultural judgment can shut that down. I know that's what's been so influential and instrumental about the work that you've done around infidelity, is bringing, it's not apologizing. It's not being an apologist for somebody who has done harm, but it is about saying that person also needs space and time to understand what happened inside of them, all the little steps along the way that led to that betrayal.
And for that, it is often more useful to have guilt than shame.
100%.
I said to someone today, he said, I feel so bad about myself that I did. I said, but this is more about you. You feel so bad about you that on some level you can't really think about how bad you made her feel.
Right.
It could be a her, them, him, doesn't matter. And it really, one is an expression of conscience. Guilt is a conscience. I understand how what I did affected you. Shame is, I can't believe that I could do such a thing, but then you're still busy with yourself. And in the moment of reckoning with betrayal, you really have to be able to see what it did to the other. And that transition can be quite challenging to some people. I think we are going to be accompanied back by Lonnie, so I don't want to start a sentence. But Lonnie, welcome back.
Thank you. What a lively, beautiful conversation between the two of you. I know there's so much great learning that everyone had the privilege of enjoying tonight. Thank you so much, Esther, for coming and taking such sensitive, thoughtful, deep dive into Alexandra's work. Thank you so much. We're really very, very grateful to you for that.
It's a treat. I will lift the book one more time for those who haven't seen it. It's also an example, this is to all of you, of, we are dear colleagues, we are friends, we support each other's work, we build on each other's work, we collaborate with each other. And that in itself is a relationship model that I also want to put out in the world and value of what can exist between two women. It's intergenerational, it's intercultural, and it is interdisciplinary on some level, but with a tremendous amount of curiosity and respect for what each of us does for quite a few years now. And so we talk about intimate relationship, but this is an intimate relationship too. Just wanted to put that out there.
It's full shine, definitely full shine. Thank you for that. I want to remind folks that we are going to be hosting an after hours with Alexandra. It's going to be starting at 8:05, which is in about 7 minutes from now. We've been putting links in chat about how do you get to come to after hours. Well, you buy a copy of this fabulous book, Love Every Day, that we've been discussing. We've been putting links in chat. Buy it from our partner bookseller, The Bookstall. In the email receipt that they'll send you will be the registration link for after hours. Come hang out, ask Alex your own questions, find out what it is that you want to know more of. We'll be there till 9 o'clock Central, so plenty of time to get a bunch of questions in. I want to ask one question here. It's going to be a lightning round question, Alex, so quick answer if you don't mind. And there's so many incredible questions, as you know, but this piece I thought was particularly interesting from Laura during the event. She says, what are some best practices you can recommend for young adults to feel complete when not in a relationship? So this is looking more at young folks who are not necessarily married, not necessarily going through breakups, but kind of that advice for the younger people, for maybe parents guiding their younger adult children.
Yeah, I think the most important thing a parent can do is kind of manage their own anxiety about their child's relationship status. And I think a parent, I think parents can get themselves really anxious when their kids are dating somebody and it can feel too soon, not the right person, this, that. And I think parents can feel anxious when their kids aren't dating. So just noticing, the more a parent can do their own work to really be a resource. My best friend, Allie, always says, okay, we're the book on the shelf. We are the resource on the shelf for our kids, and to just be the book on the shelf and to do their own work to notice what does your anxiety do based on your young adult relationship status. And for the young adult, I really want young adults I want to normalize the yearning for a relationship. To be single and to yearn for connection is normal. To be in a relationship and to yearn for the days of being single, that's also normal. And so I think those would be a couple of things. It's just that, and yearning and weakness are not the same thing.
Yeah, perfect. Love that.
I'll add a tiny thing.
Please
I'll enter from another door. I think if a youngster tells me, I am incomplete, who am I without a relationship? I think that the first thing is to look at the bias. The assumption is you're not in relationship because you're taking the romantic relationship as the end and be all.
Yeah.
But talk to me about your friends. Talk to me about your relationship with your teachers, your mentors, your coaches, your parents' friends, and tell me that you don't have relationships. All these relationships are what's going to make you, when you do meet someone, an amazing person to be in relationships, because you have tremendous relational experience. Yes. And it's a biased way of looking at it to begin with. And when the parent joins the bias, because the question was, how do I help the person feel whole? First of all, when you're young, you don't feel whole, period.
Right. Boyfriend or girlfriend's not going to do that.
It takes a while, but you certainly are not devalued and there's nothing missing. Yeah. The yearning is normal and you are living in many relationships. And these relationships, the only thing I would say to you, young person, don't stop them because you've met someone, because the tendency of a young person who enters a romantic relationship is often to abandon all the other people on the sidewalk. When that is, and then you will, when there is the heartbreak, you look, where is all everybody that I need?
Yep.
Oh, well, thank you for that extra PS. That was very, very just perfect to add on. So thank you so much, both Alexandra and Esther. What a great night. Great post-Thanksgiving night. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for joining in.